This is Barry Katz, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast.
Good day, folks. Thank you once again for tuning in to the Matt Balaker podcast. It makes me feel warm, fuzzy, and purposeful. Today's guest is a Bostonian who's made a name for himself all over the country. He's a legendary producer, manager, and purveyor of laughter and joy. Please welcome Barry Katz to the program. How you doing, Barry?
All right. Thank you for that unrehearsed speech. I appreciate that.
It just flew. It was improv, Barry. It flew off the top of my tongue. So Boston, I want to learn about the early days. Take me to the 1980s. What was the Boston comedy scene like then, Barry?
Well, hang on. Let me change the tennis balls on my walker and get into this conversation.
It might take a few moments. If you need some Metamucil, that's cool too. No rush.
I guess I'll take you back to this. When I was younger, my dad passed away when I was 4, and when I was a teenager, I would explore in the basement, and I pulled out an old rusty file cabinet, pried it open, and there were albums. They were all African American artists like Louis Armstrong and Diana Ross and Nat King Cole, and it was Shirley Bassey, and there were only 3 albums in there that were from Caucasian artists, and they were Bob Newhart, The Button Down Mind, Smothers Brothers, with the thing where he smashes the guitar over his head, and Jonathan Winter's Comedy and Tragedy. And I didn't have any record player at all because everything was damaged downstairs. And so, for those of you old enough to know, back in the day, when you went to a supermarket, they would put S&H green stamps in your bag, 1 stamp for every dollar that you spent. And you would paste them and put them in these books. And each book was worth, I think, $5. And then you could redeem them at a center for things. And I redeemed them for one of those like fold down record players with the 2 speakers on either side. And I started playing the albums, but I really wasn't into the musical side because I have the rhythm of a furnace. So I went to the people who I related to, which were the funny people. Jonathan Winters was a little too crazy for me. Musical comedy as Smothers Brothers was kind of interesting, but I wasn't very musical. And Bob Newhart spoke to me because he had those conversations with people that weren't there. And for those of you who don't know, in comedy, it's a very rare kind of comedy. It's I don't know what you even call it. It's like dialogue humor. I mean, the last time I think I saw somebody do it on television was probably Ellen in her debut on The Tonight Show, where she did 3 minutes of regular stand-up, and then she did a conversation with God. And when I say dialogue humor, you've seen many comedians do routines where they play characters of other comedians. I'm sorry, of other, not comedians. Well, sometimes they do, but other characters and things like that, and they go back and forth. But this is somebody who's actually carrying on a conversation with another person, but just using their own voice. Mm-hmm. And so it would be that way. And so I used to listen to this routine, The Driving Instructor, over and over again by Newhart. And for you historians, just so you understand what was going on in comedy back then and how groundbreaking it was, Warner Brother Records asked Bob Newhart to do a comedy album in 1959. Okay, he said, "Listen, I don't do stand-up comedy. I just do sketches." They said, "Yeah, do it anyway. Find a nightclub, do it anyway." He sends them the recording, and he gets a call like 6 months later or a year later or whatever it is that his album went gold, and it was the #1 record in America in 1959 as a comedy record. Warner Brother Records' first gold record was a comedy record. Anyway, so I memorized the driving instructor routine, and I did it at my high school talent show. And then I went to Boston University, and there was a blizzard in 1978 there, and everything was shut down. And I remember standing in Kenmore Square, and there was nothing. If you've ever experienced this in your life where you're on a street and there's nothing, and it was Kenmore Square, so it's Brookline Avenue, Beacon Street, Commonwealth Avenue, and you're here and you're looking up and there's nothing happening, no cars, nothing. And I heard laughter. And this is, I think, 1980. And no, it's 1978, sorry. You're going to have to do a lot of editing in this now. And so I look to my left, and there's a pub, ironically called Crossroads.
Crossroads.
And I walk into the door, and there's a stairway immediately going up where I hear the laughter. And I walk up the stairway, and you know how like you're a little kid with the banisters, you get to the top and you're kind of looking, and I'm looking through people's feet, and on stage I see a guy who looks like a young Larry from the Three Stooges. And he has a guitar and he's strumming it. And I'll never forget this. He's singing, "Rachel, my dear, wish you were here. Oh, how I loved her. Having sex with Rachel was amazing. It was like a concert. Frisbees would be flying around the room. Beach balls would be hitting me in the head. And every time Rachel wanted more, she'd light a match." And then he just said thanks and walked off stage. People were applauding. He walks right past me down into the night. And I'm just like, and I'd never seen a stand-up comic before. And I run down, and like a movie, I look both ways, gone. I go up to the bartender. I said, "Who was that?" She said, "That was Stephen Wright." I said, "Wow, that's exciting. Is there any place where I can do stand-up here?" She said, "Yeah, there's an open mic. You can sign up and you can come back." And so I signed up and I went back, and this is how it all started there. So I go on and I'm introduced by this guy called the Taxi Driver. He's this huge guy and he's killing, but I don't know anything about comedy, but he's fucking killing. And he brings me on, and I just shaved my head for some swimming competition, and he introduces me like this. This is how you used to get eviscerated right away. So this next guy is a funny gay guy who's hung like a buffalo. Please welcome Barry. No, and he says, "I'm just kidding. He's not funny, and he's not hung like a buffalo. Please welcome Barry Katz." And then I go on, and I'm like, Jesus, he destroyed me. But I said something to come back to him and whatever. And then I sat down and I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to do an homage to Bob Newhart. I'd like to do a routine that meant a lot to me growing up as a child that he created. And I'd like to try to reenact it for you. It's called The Driving Instructor." And I do the routine, and it fucking kills. Like, I mean, I'm killing harder than Bob Newhart on the album. I'm like, God, this is amazing. Like, this is a great feeling. And I get off stage and I do what Stephen Wright did, because I feel like that's the comedy way. You're not supposed to say goodbye to anybody. You just say thanks, and I walk out. And I hear the footsteps, the guy's running after me, Ross Bickford. He's like, where did you come from, kid? You got to come back next week and every week. We don't have people who kill like that. That's amazing. I said, "Thank you so much. I have one piece of advice for you, though. Do you mind if I give it to you?" I said, No, what is it? He said, "Listen, when you're doing somebody else's routine on stage, don't mention their name. Just take the fucking bit and use it as your own. That's what I do."
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And I ran back to my dorm room and started writing my own stuff. And I never went back there again. And so somebody saw me doing my own material, a guy named Chance Langton, who had a comedy club called Play It Again Sam's, which was at a place that had a movie bar. There was no DVD then, so then or Netflix. So movies that came off the theaters, he would buy and put there. He had a pub, a restaurant, and then downstairs was comedy. I did the door for $10 a night and did a set at 5 minutes of 2 for 5 minutes. And they fired him. And the guy who owned the place came to me. I'm like a teenager in college. He said, "Listen, kid, I like you. I want you to run the place." And I'm running a comedy club in Boston during the comedy boom. And, you know, I'm in college. And it was an amazing time. So Bob Goldthwait, who was my roommate at the time, I gave to host the Wednesday show, Denis Leary Thursday. I think Dana Gould and this guy DJ Hazard on Friday, and then Saturday was Lenny Clark from Rescue Me every other Saturday, and Sunday was Anthony Clark and this comedy team called Zito and Bean. And so, and then I had all these people like Stephen Wright and Paula Poundstone, and it just took off. It was insane. And that's how I started in the comedy business.
Good God. That's amazing. So timing wise, Barry, was it a matter of weeks or months from when you were kind of doing Bob Newhart's bit to running this club? Like, how much time had passed?
It was within 6 months.
And wow. So what was the transition? Obviously, the Newhart bit helped you in high school. It helped you your first time on stage, but then you had to do your own material. Where did you pull inspiration? What was that process like?
Oh, well, you know, one of the things I've been around so many comedians and so many amazing artists that, you know, one of the things that's so misunderstood about the profession of comedy is that it seems like it would be easy to just write things that are funny. Like, it seems like it would be something that's simple, you know, that you have the premise and then you write the punchline, and you know, it's like a horror movie. You know, it's the bigger the surprise, the better the horror movie. The bigger the surprise, the better the comedy is. And sometimes it can be these long stories, like, you know, in concepts and premises. I mean, I think Jim Jeffries' gun control bit I think it might be 15 minutes long. You know, and that's the premise is, you know, 50% of you love guns, 50% of you hate guns, and I'm going to tell you my opinion about guns, and show you, and you know, and so, but there's like people like Stephen Wright who it came off the page a different way, you know. I have the oldest typewriter in the world. It types in pencil. You know, I went to a cafe. It said breakfast anytime, so I ordered French toast during the Renaissance. You know, like, or it could be a young comedian like who I see in the club sometimes, Sarah Halstead, who says something to the effect of, "Hey, my name's Sarah. I'm 45 years old. You know, you're getting old as a woman when you have to buy your own cocaine." You know, it's like, so you know, but it's the incredible surprise and uniqueness of things, and then being able to go on stage and create the magic and be the greatest surfer in the world with whatever audience you have, and adjust to it. And, you know, as a young comic, what's weird is that I'd say less than 1% of the comedians that I've ever seen go on right away and just crush, you know, and I would always go on and do really well in the beginning, except when I had to go on at 5 minutes of 2 at Played Against Sam's. That was a tough situation. But you know, it's about how life is a sale. Everything's a sale. You know, you're on your podcast, you're doing it. If you don't sell people on the fact that you're great and you have a great show and things are going to be wonderful, no one's listening. No one cares about it.
We have a mediocre episode. Tune in.
Yeah. So you have to sell yourself on stage without saying, I'm selling myself.
Right.
And you have to make people feel safe. And sometimes I know this sounds weird, but there's artists that there are like just the exact opposite. You know, Sam Kinison didn't make you feel safe.
Not at all.
But he used fear and almost fear and comedy together to get you, you know, screaming at you or whatever. Bob Goldthwait was amazing. That character that he started when he was 19 or whenever it was, 15. I mean, that character destroyed. I remember going on before him and I killed. And I thought to myself, man, I am like this poor bastard. He's dressed in like a hunter's cap, a hunter's outfit, a hunter's pants, Elmer Fudd boots. This guy is going to be tough for him. Fucking got a standing ovation. It's like, I was like, Jesus Christ, that's incredible. Because it's the surprise and enlightenment of stand-up. So when I was going on, I didn't have the great writing skills, you know, that some other people had, or the great natural storytelling skills that other people had. But I still did well. But I ended up hosting a lot of shows and Played Against Sam's. I ended up hosting most all of the shows, mainly because, you know, it was a way as a young person where I could, you know, I didn't have to pay somebody to host. I could host on my own and I could get better as a comic, hopefully. And I could do a kind of like a symbiotic thing where I could still have 4 comics who got paid and did their thing, but I could host and I could also learn a lot about the business.
Yeah, thank you. I remember being on a podcast years ago where I argued that outside the headliner, the host has the most important role in a show. What's your opinion on that?
Well, in Boston, the host, except for me, were the headliner.
Oh, okay.
So it was the Steve Sweeney show, the Lenny Clark show, the whatever, and they used to host and they used to bring on people, and that's, you know, how it was in Boston. So if you're from Boston, you would agree with that. In you know, the way it works with headliners on the road, the host is not the most important person and the feature is not the most important person or the second most important, whatever. It's just like you're there to service the artist and you're also have to service yourself in a way. You have to be selfish, but also be unselfish. Because your goal, obviously, as an opening act or a feature, let's face it, your goal is to become a headliner.
Right.
How do you become a headliner? You start giving the headliner a tough time. And then he says, hey, pal, you know, it's time. You know, you should do your own thing.
You're not opening for me anymore.
You're not opening for him. I remember Jay Moore used to have Ralphie May open up for him all the time. And Ralphie May would get these standing ovations. And I'd be like, Jay, what are you doing? I mean, like, this guy is making it so hard for you. And I said, let's face it, sometimes I don't think you come to that level, you know, in your headliner set. Sometimes.
And you're comparing him.
But he argued with me. He said, Barry, if I don't play tennis with people who are better than me or can give me a strong run for my money, then I'm never going to get better. I'm not going to put some tomato can on before me. I want to put somebody on who's going to push me.
Well, that shows maturity. I mean, it also shows he cares about the audience, because if Ralphie May is on the bill, it's going to be a better show. And I discovered Ralphie May, probably like a lot of people, through Last Comic Standing. it was the year when Jay Moore was the host, and I understand you had a big hand in that, Barry. Can you give us the story about the genesis of Last Comic Standing?
Last Comic Standing was a thing where Jay and myself and we were trying to create something that was kind of unique. And the first thing we kind of created, the name of it was Comic House.
Comic House?
And Comic House or something like that. It was just like a show where comics lived in the house and they interacted. Gotcha. And we went to a bunch of people, and but the person that we went to that we loved was Peter Engel, who created Saved by the Bell and Saturday morning television for kids. And Peter's still a good friend of mine. I just had breakfast with him the other day. He's 87 years old. And he'd never done a reality show, but he had a grandfather deal at NBC. And for those of you who don't know what that might be, is like he had a deal from the past from Saved by the Bell where he had like 50% of the profits, you know, and they weren't like, wow. they weren't like adjusted profits. They like, okay. He actually made more profits than NBC did on the show. And so his deal was structured like that. So every deal he brought in under this deal, it was a 50% fee. So in other words, imagine these days, anyone listening who's a network executive or anyone between, imagine like you go into a show like whatever, the Office, and you're getting 50% of the executive producer fee and 50% of the back end, and you're like, I mean, and it's got like 1 billion views. It's like, so it was an incredible deal. So even if we were splitting it with Peter, it was 25% back end, and you still can never get that these days unless you're like some ungodly talent, you know. Normally, look, if you're doing a deal and you're the lead in the show, if you could get 5% back end, a miracle. 2.5, 10 is holy shit. 20 is like, I am God walking on earth, probably. And these days, the way things are, how tough it is. But, you know, again, it's like anything else. The trajectory of the greatest artists, you know, make the most money and whatever. So we took that deal, and there was a woman who worked there named Brittany Levin, who was very instrumental in you know, our relationship and moving forward there as well. And she was married to one of the partners at CAA, and so we pitched it, and they were not buying it, not saying no. And then Fox came out with some trade announcement that they were planning on doing a comedy show, whatever, and then they greenlit it the next day. We came up with ideas for the name of the show, and I believe Jay came up with the name Last Comic Standing, and so it began. And our first season, we were nominated for an Emmy Award, so that was exciting.
Very exciting, and it broke. Like, I mean, Jay Moore was the name. I mean, he was a host before that, but I think Amy Schumer, I don't know if Sam Morril was on it, but obviously Ralphie May. I mean, there's so many comedians that was sort of their springboard into.
Yeah, there was kind of like a lull in comedy during that time, and I think it helped bring it back. Although a lot of people don't like competition shows, and who can blame them? You know, it's like because like the first year. And this is not, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody, but, you know, the first year, like Ralphie May goes on stage. He gets like 2 standing ovations in the middle of his set. He clearly blows everyone off the stage, and he doesn't win. Another person wins.
Yeah.
And that other person was Dad Fan. And that's and that was like difficult to understand because I wasn't aware of what reality television was. And reality television is something different than the reality of stand-up comedy business. Reality television is 50% is the stand-up and 50% is your story.
Yeah.
Your story in your life of what's happening and why and how people feel and how they, their emotions resonate with you. And so Dat Fan had a really compelling, incredible story. And that was, very heartfelt, so that's, I think that's what helped put him over the edge, not his stand-up comedy. And I'm not shitting on Dat Fan, like saying, hey, you're horrible or you're this or that, you're that. I'm just saying at that moment, there's no one in the world that would say that he didn't have the best performance that night.
Yeah, it's crazy because I watched that, and Dat Fan was very young, incredibly likable. Has the backstory that you would hope for to like win popularity contests. But I don't know if Rich Voss was also on that season. But I mean, they had these people that were doing it for probably 20 years, and I was like, Dat Fan, who's a wonderful human, a very good comic, he was not at Rich Voss's level at that time. And so I think it speaks to what you're saying. But I mean, that's kind of stand up in a nutshell. I mean, it has aspects of being a meritocracy, but if you're a booker, a lot of times you just care about butts in the seats. It's not always about artistry. And so I'm curious, Barry, like how do you communicate that to your clients who might legitimately be some of the best in the business, but like there's a TikToker or someone who has like 2 million subscribers that might be able to pack a house that night where someone else can't?
Look, ideally in comedy, there's many venues that you can work. There's many different areas that there are to do comedy. And so it doesn't matter to me whether there's somebody on YouTube or TikTok. Look, when I was coming up in New York, after I moved to New York, just some backstory. I got married and my wife passed away really young. And I just said, I'm out of here. And I went to New York and started my career there. And there was a guy named Walt Willey. He was a soap opera star. He wasn't really a seasoned stand-up comedian, but he would sell out every show. And the comedians would be like, dirty, rotten world. Soap opera star. And it was like, but the fact is that there's always going to be something like that happens. So it's just cyclical. So if you're a TikToker or a YouTuber, God bless you. Yeah. You figured it out. You figured out how to do it. And many of you would say, I don't even know what I did to figure it out, but I did it. I executive produced a show with Bill Bellamy called Top Billin'. And he talks about how like he got like a book deal and an hour special and all this other stuff because just one day, just during the pandemic, he just started telling stories inside of his car, like a different story of a celebrity that he had a situation with. And for some reason, those took off with millions of views. He didn't understand why or how, but it just happened, and that's the way it works. I remember Laura Cleary, a former client of mine. She was in a show for like 4 years. I think it was Women Behaving Badly or whatever, some crazy show. And she came in one day and she said, I'm done. I'm not going to audition for people anymore. I'm going to start social media. I'm going to make a video every day for 365 days. And if one doesn't become viral and take me off, then I'll be back in your office. And it was like 6 months later, and a video that she did became viral. Unfortunately, that video, she forgot to tag it or put anything in the back of it, so nobody knew who she was. And so she had like millions and millions of views, but it didn't do anything for her. So then she had to wait to do it again, and she did it again. And I remember when I did a podcast with her, it was from her house in the Hollywood Hills with the pool and everything, because she made it happen. And I have a lot of respect for those people. But in stand-up, I don't think there's anybody. Everybody always says, to me, like, oh, how do I make it? I don't understand how these people make it. What do I do? And I always say a few things that probably make them want to kill me. I always say, wherever your home comedy club is, kill 10 times in a row there. And when I say kill, I mean, if you were to poll every audience member in the club those 10 times, they would say you were the best. The barbacks, the servers, the manager, the light guy, the sound guy, the comedians that hate you. 10 times in a row, everyone says you were the best. Well, get a fucking helmet, because it's all over. You're on your way, and you're going to make money, and you're going to do whatever. But if you can't do that, then you're not ready. And you're not ready to draw people and bring people into a thing and bring your audience with you and create an audience. Now, again, you are if you do it through social media. Mm-hmm. Look, I am honored to have been on the ground floor, like the first to create social media for an artist with Dane Cook. Nobody did social media before Dane Cook. I remember negotiating a website for him. He said, I need you to negotiate a website for me. I actually said to him, and I'm should be embarrassed to say this. I actually said to him, what's a website? And he said, I'll show you. And he showed me the U.S. Army website, which was fantastic. It was like one of the few websites out there. He says, I want that web. I want a website as good as this. He said, I've said, but no artists have websites. Exactly, Barry. I want to be the first. You know that. You know what it's like. You do this with people. I want you to do it with me. And so I negotiated with the U.S. Army guy. The worst negotiation I ever had. I never was in a negotiation where somebody just said no over and over again. It re-emphasized the power of no for me, because he got exactly what he wanted, is $25,000 for the website. It's like he would not budge. I think I got an extra 2 pages out of him.
Okay. So you had to negotiate with
Dane
an army
created this. So Dane created the website, which is amazing. And he made a commitment to answer his first 15,000 messages to me. He said, I'm going to answer my first 15,000. And then he started social media on MySpace and had this keyboard in his office and created like a jingle, DaneCook.com. And he would put his comedy bits up audio on Napster with DaneCook.com after it to drive people to his site, and then MySpace. And then by the time we did the deal for HBO, he pressed a button and sold out 2 shows at Boston Garden in one night, 38,000 people in like no time at all. It was insane. He'd never done a hard ticket, probably more than 500 people, up until that point. And then we did Madison Square Garden. He pressed a button, 2 shows in one night. To this day, there's no stand-up comedian I know of that's ever done 2 shows. And I don't think there's any musical artist that I know of that's ever done 2 shows in one night in an NBA arena.
Yeah, I want to hear more about Dane Cook, because I remember watching him, around 2005 at the Laugh Factory, just blowing the roof off the place. But, I almost wanted to hate him because he was talented and good looking. And then I since learned through Jay Davis how hardworking Dane was or is. But his meteoric rise was, I honestly, I haven't seen anything like it. Like, what sticks out to you about that time from him kind of playing clubs to selling out Madison Square Garden?
Well, the thing that I love that sticks out, and I hope he doesn't get mad at me for saying this, but I when I started representing him, I was trying so hard to get him to New York City.
Okay.
To get out of Boston and get to New York City. And I remember I found an apartment for him to rent in Lincoln Towers in New York City, 66th and West End, because I had an apartment that I owned there. And he was just so lonely. And so, and he had kind of like a speech impediment. And he had no no girls would, like he had problems with relationships in the sense that he didn't have a girl that he loved.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the working that he was doing with comedy was not going exactly where he wanted to. And there's two things that make a person happy: reciprocal love and fruitful labor that puts food on the table and a roof over your head. And he kind of had none of that. But I saw something in him, and and that's one of the things about myself that I don't really understand. I can't, you can't quantify it in a court of law. And I freely admit, there's times when I feel like I've been extraordinary at what I do, and there's times when I wasn't as extraordinary. I still did a great job, and people booked great gigs, and I created great opportunities. But it's like having children. You have one child, they get that much attention. You have two, they get that much attention. And I think when things started getting really crazy, there were just a lot of people that I was trying to make a difference for. But he was somebody that I really, I don't know, there was something about him. And I think that when I experienced, like when I was representing Dave Chappelle, I think when Dave Chappelle, after 8 years, told me that he didn't want me to work with him anymore, I think that put my focus on, that I could really go forward and throw myself behind somebody else who I thought could do great things. And so, he was really, every comic that you see that's working today has gone through just bone-crushing loneliness and self-doubt and fighting through it. And then the jealousy or hatred of other comics.
Good God.
And it goes full circle, things go full circle sometimes. It's like this life is this thing that it has a plan. Mm-hmm. I represented Louie CK for 7 years. Love Louie CK. He made a mistake. And then all of a sudden, it's like he's like kryptonite.
Right.
It's like, meanwhile, whatever football player can beat his wife in the face in an elevator and drag her out the elevator. And it's like Roger Goodell's like, okay, Mr. Rice, let's see here. The last person who dragged their wife out by their hair, let's see, what was that, Joe? 8 games? Okay, 8 games, and you're suspended to pay for 8 games, right, Joe? Yeah. Okay, and then you're back in the game, Ray.
Right.
And it's like, why isn't there some kind of governing body in comedy where there's some president who says, okay, Louie, you did that. What you're going to do is you're going to do a tour that benefits just women in comedy. You're going to give this amount of money to that cause. And then after 1 year, you're going to be back on Netflix and your show is going to be back on. Like, why is Kevin Spacey? I mean, the fucking guy was found innocent, whether he was or he wasn't. I mean, one of the greatest actors of my generation. And the guy hasn't worked in 8 years. Is that the way is that? Meanwhile, one of our presidential candidates freely admits he grabs women by the cash and prizes, using a Dane Cook reference.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, vote for me. It's like and everybody says, okay, you're in. It's like, and again, I'm not getting political. I'm just saying that it's like,
I mean, you could play about like Bill Clinton can command $500,000 for a speech, there's
the guy shot his love on somebody's shoulder. It's crazy.
There were a lot of dry cleaning fees. Yeah, it was.
This is what's so strange about but Dane, and anybody who's a comedian listening is like, if you're going through a difficult time, you're going through trials and tribulations, you're going through a little bit of doubt, you don't know what's happening, you don't understand why that person's getting that gig and you're not getting it or whatever. It's all like this puzzle that you're working on. You're working on the hardest puzzle ever. But if you stick with it, you're going to finish the fucking puzzle. It's impossible not to finish a puzzle, even if it's the hardest puzzle in the history of the world. If you have all the pieces, you're going to finish it. You just don't know when you're going to finish it. You don't know how you're going to finish it. You don't know the moment where you're going to find that key piece that you've been looking for. But once it happens, it happens. And it's amazing. Like I look at somebody like Brad Williams, who I represent, who I love. I mean, and he, during the pandemic, and, I don't know if he understood or if he knew what was going to happen on the other side. He just got married, he's got
a kid,
a house, he's got a kid. And it's like, is it going to be okay on the other side? But what Brad did, which was, I think, amazing, which I hope he doesn't mind me saying, is that he woke up every day like he had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
He woke up every day like, hey, I got nothing going on. There's nothing. I'm going to do everything I can today to be the best I can be. And hopefully that'll take me incrementally to the next step, even though he was somewhere.
Yeah.
Because he didn't know what was going to happen at the end. So during the pandemic, a lot of people were like, woe is me.
Mm-hmm.
Brad was like, yes, I can't speak for him, but I'm sure there was like some feelings inside, like most comics, like, are we going to be okay after this is all over with?
Is it just going to be Zoom shows for the rest of our lives?
And so when he came out of the pandemic, he was selling out every show and adding shows. It's insanity. And then it became bigger and too many, to add like 5 o'clock shows. And then finally, what happens? You say, okay, I gotta go into theaters now, and now he's got this huge tour that he's working on. That's like, I think he's got like 50 dates in the first 6 months. It's like insanity. And people wonder, like, why do comics who do theaters, why do sometimes those sell out quicker than comedy clubs?
Yeah.
And the reason being is because a theater is a special event. It's not like you can wait till the last minute and get a ticket at a comedy club or just walk up. A theater, you have to like plan something. And when he put that tour up and he had like 10,000 tickets sold in like a fucking seconds, it's like, he was like, holy shit, this is, I know he's never the kind of guy who says it, but just being around him, it's like, hey, look, the hard work pays off. And the hard work and working on what you want to be and what you want to look like in the future and what your vision is. And for anybody who's a young comic, it's the same thing. It's just the little victories. So if you're just doing the shitty paid open mics where you got to pay $5 to go on, then your next victory is, okay, let me see if I can get on an open mic where I don't have to pay.
Right. You're
and
making
then your
money
next
then.
victory is, okay, let me see if I can get that spot before the show starts, at the Improv or whatever it is, like that 5 minutes to bring on the host or wherever it is, the Ha Ha Cafe or whatever. Or let me see if I can get some unpaid shows that there's crowds coming in.
Right.
And then the next step is, let me see if I can get a paid show. I don't care if it's in Temecula. Let me see if I can get a paid show. And then let me see if I can get more paid shows. And then let me see if I can now stop emceeing and people book me as a feature.
Mm-hmm.
And then let me see if I can get my first headline show. I don't care if it's in Hesperia, California. Let me get it. And then you just keep building and building on it. There's so many, I do this thing called the Blueprint, which I started during the pandemic for young comics. And there's like over 500 people in this community. And there's all different tiers of what people, because a free community, there's different things for what people get. But I'm blown away by what's happened with some of the people in the community that I just, it's incredible. I mean, and you realize what's possible. Everything is possible because I've seen everything. I've seen everything. I've been on the floor of Madison Square Garden watching a comedian do 2 shows. I've been a part of albums that have been in the top 5 of the Billboard regular charts.
Right. Not just comedy. Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, I've been on film sets with, I produced films and been on film sets with, I think like 10, 15 Academy Award winners. I've been able to work with these great directors. I've spent time with Attell. I have the podcast Industry Standard where I get to sit down with the Kevin Harts and the people like that. So I feel like there's so much inside me that I've been blessed to, and I know it's an eye rolling when you say I've been blessed, but I really am humbled because I've gotten to be a part of all these things, all these half-hour comedies that I produced or 40-hour you get a perspective to see every part of the business and how the mind works of so many different comics from, it's incredible. That's from the mind of Louie CK to the mind of Bill Burr, who I represented for probably 7 years, Wanda Sykes, and how they made the jump. And, like I say, it's humbling because it's like when you're doing anything out there, whatever you're doing, whatever your profession is, it's like you're always trying to figure out the victories, the little victories to let you know, like, okay, maybe I can do this. So when I started as a manager, it's like when I managed Louie CK, or he was my first client, or Jay Moore, or it's like these people, like when you represent one person, then they become a household name and a multimillionaire. Yeah, it's lucky, 2, it's maybe a fluke, 3, a coincidence. But then in your mind, when it happens 25 times, you're like, okay, maybe something's happening here. And maybe there's something that with my talent and their talent, maybe there's something happening where I can help artists. And that's what's so frustrating about being a manager. What I found and why I did Industry Standard and why I do the Blueprint is because I want to make an impact on people like I do with the management club, but you can't manage everybody.
No.
So I want to be in a situation where people can sort of like hang around me. They could Airbnb my mind if they want, and they can do things that help them and help their careers. And I'm excited to what's happened with certain people that, and I know that anything can happen, and I love the trajectory of certain people that I see out in the world of comedy, young people like Janelle Draper, who's doing great things now, or Natalie Perlin, who just went to Edinburgh and 3,800 shows. She was one of the top 5 shows. This is the thing that, it's exciting to see. And every day, every week, there's always somebody breaking through. And it will continue all the time. Because what comedians have to realize is that it's kind of like Squid Game and the Hunger Games. You have to figure out a way to live another day and move forward, or else people are going to pass you. Leno said something to me and probably to many other people that I love. I just love this. And I hope I don't butcher it. He said, "We are all in a line. So if you're a young comedy artist out there and you're starting at the end of the line. But somebody's going to get fucked up on drugs.
Sure.
Somebody's going to show up late. Somebody's going to be drunk. Somebody's going to call somebody an asshole. Somebody's going to create drama, and then you're going to move up in the line. Somebody's going to bomb, and you're not. You're going to move up in the line. And before you know it, you're close to or at the front of the line, or you can see the front of the line. And that's the way it is. And I want to say one other thing about this as an analogy of my time growing up for all the comedy artists out there. Don't think that what you're doing is enough. It's not. It's never enough. Don't think that you're going to outsmart people. Think to yourself that there's 100 of you out there as your competition. How do you beat you? I remember I was a teenager, and there was an announcement on the AM radio that Elvis Presley was coming to the Springfield, Massachusetts Civic Center, and tickets were going on sale at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Now, you couldn't get tickets anywhere but going to the venue back then. So I remember I set my alarm for 3 o'clock in the morning, and I drove down. And as I'm driving down to Springfield Civic Center, I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm going to get my tickets, get out of here. This is going to be so exciting. I'll wait like 6 hours and it'll be great. And, I know what I'm doing. I get down there, 5,000 people are in line around the Springfield Civic Center. And I got my ticket, but I got my ticket at midnight. I literally waited in line 18 hours.
Wow.
So I want to share with all of you comedy artists out there. If there's 5,000 people ahead of me in line at the Springfield, Massachusetts Civic Center in 1977, how many people you think are planning to be ahead of you in the comedy business? And you got to figure out how to navigate and get past those people. And you will, if you have the confidence in knowing that you're going to figure out that puzzle. You just don't know when.
Right. That's all puzzles finish if you have the pieces. We connected a few years ago, Barry, over Greg Giraldo when I completed his book, and you were gracious enough to help promote it. So thank you for that. And, we could have a separate episode just on him, but for people out there who are unfamiliar with him and his work, how would you like to see Greg Giraldo remembered?
Well, what's interesting is that I can honestly say that I was one of those people that in the comedy scene that I was all over the place, and I went to a lot of shows and I hung out with a lot of people. And Greg was the kind of person in my mind that I felt like he was. I never really hung out with him like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He seemed to be a kind of guy who was like, he had his own
Groups
crew or
and
whatever that he liked to hang with. And I was very naive as far as what people were doing and if they were getting fucked up. Granted, Chappelle would smoke a bag of weed a day, and I saw that, but I didn't see a lot of the other stuff that people saw. So when you think about if somebody could come down from the heavens and say how they'd want to be remembered, I mean, the way I remember Greg is this way. I always remembered him as being first class, just kind, generous, a guy who really, really treated me like everyone would want to be treated. And people love being around him. I think, it's always interesting. It was Lorne Michaels who said to me, or said to many people, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong fucking room. And, I always felt like Greg Giraldo was in the wrong room all the time because, and I had the unique distinction of being on the set of his first sitcom because I had a client, John DiMaggio, who was the voice of Bender, who was on that show,
Common Law,
that episode. But I don't know if Greg would want to be in a situation where he was a voice for people who were struggling with addiction, or if he'd want to be a voice for somebody who's struggling in comedy and to get to the next level in comedy, or if he'd want to be remembered as somebody who was great. I know when you do the roasts, it's a struggle because the roasts are this catch-22. It's like when Louie Anderson hosted Family Feud. Yeah, you get $6 million. You work 7 weeks a year, and you shoot 165 shows, but then you're known as a game show host. And then the acting jobs stop and the film things stop, and now you're just doing stand-up and you're not being considered an actor. And it wasn't until 13 years later that he got the opportunity from Louie CK and Zach Galifianakis to do Baskets, and he won an Emmy Award. But, it's the same with Greg. Anybody who does the roast, if you look at any person who was a regular on the roast, it's very hard to, I don't know if it's a fluke, but think of all the people that were regular roasters on the show and think of how many of them have had, wildly successful film and television acting careers. And it's very challenging because you're seen in a certain light. Mm-hmm. And even though you're revered in that light and people have enormous respect for your muscle of insulting people because it's a real muscle.
It is.
Not a lot of people can do that. It's just, that's why Jeff Ross is on every single roast, not just that but he's a producer as well. And a lot of people don't know this, but Jeff Ross and I, we brought the roast to Comedy Central. And so I think Greg, if he could come down from the heavens, I don't know what lessons he'd say, but I think you always want to be remembered. If you're a comedian, you always want to be remembered as one of the best comedians that ever lived. And you always want to be remembered as a person who inspired, enlightened, and impacted people's lives through your voice and the way you lived your life. And if you made mistakes along the way, I'd say you'd probably want to come down and share with people the mistakes you made and show them what happens when you make them. And so they could avoid them in the future, like he wasn't able to.
Right. Well said. Well, you've done, gosh, so many impressive things in your career. If you had to pick one or two, what are you most proud of, Barry?
I think I had a friend of mine, I had dinner with them, and they said, let's go down to the ocean. It was nighttime. I said, okay. And I'm down to the ocean with this person for an hour. Just no phones, nothing. Just sitting there, dozing off, doing whatever. I think they're meditating. And they tapped me on the shoulder. They said, let's go. I said, okay. How long we been here? They said, an hour. And as I was walking back, I said to them, I said, I dream about, in the comedy business, giving people the feeling that you just gave me tonight. And they said, what are you talking about? You've lived in Malibu for 15 years. You could go to the ocean anytime you want. I said, I know, but I can count the times on half a hand that I went down at night and felt that feeling, just staring at the ocean for an hour and no worries, no cares, and the freedom that it gave me and the feeling that it gave me of euphoria, and that there was something bigger. And I said, if I can give that feeling through the tools of what I have in my brain in terms of the entertainment business and comedy to other people, I hope that I do that. That's what will make me the happiest and the most proud. And I think that's why I started Industry Standard 10 years ago, and why I do this blueprint thing. People always look at me and they say, what the fuck you doing, Katz? I mean, don't you have enough to do? You gotta do these things, and whatever you gotta do is you gotta do Zoom calls on, on a one night a week with these people, but I want to make a difference. And if you're talking about a specific instances of pride or things of that nature, I think the pride comes always from doing something that no one else did before with an artist. Mm-hmm. Like, selling out 2 shows at Boston Garden and Madison Square Garden, starting social media for an artist, having an album go in the top 5 of the Billboard charts twice, never been done for a comedian. Just things that I worked on that I love that have really never been done before, or if they've been done so rarely, like when you're standing behind that crawl space at Saturday Night Live with the host ready to go on, and it's a premiere episode, and there's only been 45 or whatever 50 premiere episodes. Mm-hmm. So you're one of 50 people who sat there and shook your artist's hand as they walk out. It's pretty those things are really special. And also, when you realize that I'm emotionally intelligent, I'm not intellectually intelligent. But when you realize that you've been a part of being with an artist like Chappelle and Burr and Wanda and CK and just these people who are like, I mean, you have to pinch yourself even when you're watching one of their specials, that you're allowed to actually be able to as a human being to be able to watch something so great, let alone be able to work with them. It's like I watch one of, Sticks and Stones. It's like, I mean, I don't even know if there's a special that maybe Carlin's or what.
Right.
So it's like you're watching something even when you're not representing somebody, and you're like, oh my God, this is like an unbelievable honor that I get to see something like this, and then have the opportunity to work with those people and know those people and be friends with those people and have them bust my balls at times.
Well,
that's what makes me proud.
Nice. Well, it's an unbelievable honor to have you on this program. Where can people learn more about you, your blueprint, your shows, what you're up to, Barry?
They can just go to barrykatz.com and they can learn anything about me or find anything, hopefully. But it's really been great. You're a good man. I'm sorry I relegated you to talking for 6 seconds during this entire hour.
It was 5 more than I expected, so thank you.
I'm sorry I'm so long-winded, but you're a good man. You want to make a difference, and you want to honor people, and that's an amazing quality. And so I'm very grateful that you chose me to be your 647th guest. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Barry.
I'm gonna have to get up a little earlier to go to the Springfield Civic Center to get on the Matt Balaker podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Barry. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.